May of last year, I made a video about hardy kiwi propagation with a technique called serpentine layering, or layering. And a number of people were really interested in that video, a lot of questions asking for a follow-up video. And so what I'd like to do in this video is show you how it worked a little bit more than 1 year later, and share some food for thought on ways of taking this technique and going deeper with it. So stick with us, I'll explain the topic again and then go deep into how it's worked out for us. If you haven't seen that first video, I'm going to link to it here as well in the description, where I go into detail how I went about this process. The very basic idea is when you have a vine, so in this case hardy kiwi, this will also work with grapes, which I'll show you in a little bit, Schisandra, there's all sorts of perennial vines that this works for. What I've done is I took one of the vines, I ran it along the ground, and I happened to bury it with soil along the ground. And now 1 year later, what happened is the vine, where it was under soil, chose to root thoroughly. You can see this is where the tip of the vine was last year. It rooted down into the earth, and then this year sent up, this is all new green growth. This goes up about 8 feet as of this year, 6 to 8 feet. And so what I'll do is at the end of the season, I can dig this out and cut it away from the main stem and have an incredibly well-rooted and borderline production-aged known hardy kiwi female. And you can see from that pattern that all along this stem, if I take the time and bury all of this deeply in soil, I'll be able to get a lot more copies just like this. So it truly works. This is serpentine layering, which I'll link to in the description, a more detailed explanation of that. But basically running vines along the ground, letting them tiproot at each of the nodes where they're growing. Those growth points are where they're willing to root. Let me show you some other examples of how you can design with this from the outset. Knowing that serpentine layering works to propagate perennial vines, I can establish a nursery bed very intentionally with a layout that will facilitate that. In this example, I've got a 3-foot wide by 6-foot long bed where I've planted out Arctic kiwis and self-fertile Schisandra, Arctic kiwi male and female, and I've laid them out running the vines along the ground so that as the new growth points develop and evolve, I can simply layer them, serpentine layer them around each of those points. So this is later June, early July, and so they're just getting going. I just put these in about 2 weeks ago from potted plants. And so by the end of the season, there'll be, at least 50, maybe more, vining points that'll be growing with soil, sawdust, aged leaves, aged wood chips, what have you, banked around them and rooting actively. Let's take a look in the back where we've got a grape that has been serpentine layered for 2 years and how that's working. 2 years ago, a friend of mine gave me some hardwood cuttings about yay long of Niagara grape. I planted a number of them out. One of them I left, and I believe this was the first year, last 2 years ago, the shoot that rooted and started to grow. Last year what I did is I took all of the shoots that came from it and I pinned them to the ground and banked soil around them. So this is last year's serpentine layering run in this direction, as well as one vine that I kept running along the ground, burying each point in soil. So this is 2 years of a growth point buried. And at this point, I don't want to pull it up because we're in the middle of the summer, but as you can imagine from the way it's responding, that is a hugely developed root system. This is a very independent plant. Come fall, I can dig all of this plant up and snip the lateral run and have an incredibly well-rooted plant coming from here, as well as this length. You can see I continue on. Everywhere that these joints have soil, actually that one doesn't have it there, but let me show you another one. This is reminding me I need to get a little bit more soil on these. So here, so you can see I've just had it run right along the ground. This is a nice example here. It's not best practice to do this in the middle of the summer, but I thought folks would be interested in seeing. Here is a growth point that was under soil. So there's the growth and there are the roots. Here's one that just recently started getting under soil, and so there is the new root starting to develop for it. And it has a ways to go, but by the end of the season this should be incredibly well established. Here's even more along this length. So you can see everywhere that there's a growth point, if that stem is buried in soil, it will root into it. That one hardwood cutting from 2 years ago may very well result in 25 to 30 plus well-rooted vines that are ready to produce fruit next year. What I need to do is bring a few more buckets of compost and mulch and make sure I just keep burying it as time allows. This whole bed is one massive cloning bed of Antovnica apples, which are being stool layered, this Niagara grape, which is being serpentine layered, as I mentioned, as well as apricots, goji, European pear, rootstock. There's even honeyberry in here. So this whole bed can produce a food forest replication system, all just by burying the stems with soil and waiting. That serpentine layering, highly recommended that you try doing it. It's not too late this season to take vines, lay them along the ground, and bury them. Let us know how it works for you. Let us know any questions you have, and let's have some dialogue in the comments. Thanks so much for watching.